Vision Australia.
Blindness,
low vision,
Opportunity.
So, Karen, one thing you talk about is giving realistic feedback, and sometimes, I mean, that's a pretty big role of a service provider when I think about it. But, you know, how do you do that, and how do you do that well?
I think that as a service provider, the most important thing to remember always is that you have to establish rapport with your client. You have got to get to know the client. You have to be comfortable with the person. The other person has to be comfortable with you. You can't launch into realistic feedback until you've established rapport. And I think a lot of us are under the gun as service providers to get on with the task at hand, to provide the service and be gone. And that's hard, because what I'm encouraging you to do is step back and take a minute or two at the beginning of every session that you have with a client, just to say, hey, how are you? What interesting things have been happening in your life? To give the client space to relax and be comfortable and to chit-chat with you a little bit. It's that role modeling that we do when we are trying to teach young people and adults how to communicate easily. And I think that's the most critical thing we do as service providers. Establish rapport, and then you can launch into the activity. And in the process, be mindful that you need to pay attention to the performances of the client during the task that you're working on, so that you can give them realistic feedback at the end of the task. I really do have kind of a tried and true method that I use. I call it my sandwich approach to giving feedback, and I've used it forever. It is really, really important to remember that people don't hear as much beyond something that they perceive as negative. And the first step, or the bread for my sandwich, if you will, I'm going to always start there with a positive message about caring for the client, believing in the client's abilities, and letting that other person know that I value the person. And I have my 2 pieces of bread, and then whatever you want to throw into the middle, meat, cheese, veggies, I don't care. The comments that you're going to make that you're concerned perhaps might be perceived as negative or critical, typically. So the bread, the first piece of bread, is always a caring message. I believe in you, and I want to see you just like you want to see you achieve your goals. I want you to achieve what you want in life. And then I'm going to put in my piece of feedback, which may sometimes be perceived as somewhat negative or critical. Hopefully not negative, critical, a challenging kind of statement. I'm going to preface that with an I message. I'm confused about how you're going to make this happen, because I'm not sure that your performance is what I would expect of you at this age. Your performance is not up to par. I'm concerned about it. It feels to me as if you are moving more slowly, or you're not doing as much as you need to do compared to the other kids. Next piece of bread, the other side of this sandwich. And I'm concerned because I really know how important it is to you. I know how important it is to get into university, or to get this job, or to live independently, whatever your goal may be. I'm going to come back to what you told me you wanted to achieve and frame it. So if the child or young person then comes back to me and says, well, I can't do anything about that piece of meat that I had in this sandwich. I can't do anything about that. It's beyond my scope. It's because I'm blind. At that juncture, what I'm going to share with the child or the young person is, when I hear you saying things like this, it makes me think you're making an excuse for something that's not working for you. And again, I'm going to use my sandwich approach. Remember what I told you. I really do believe in you. I really do care about you. I think you could do better than this. This thing that you're not performing well on is something that I believe in my heart of hearts you can do. If you prove to me that you can't, I'll let go of it. But until you prove to me you can't do it, I'm going to believe that you can. And that's kind of putting that piece of bread on the other side. If we start with a message that says your performance isn't adequate, that's all they hear.
Would you approach it any differently with parents and other family members? Because a lot of times that's who we're working with, right? Especially when they're little.
I would still use that sandwich approach. The big difference, if I'm working directly with a family member versus a child per se, is that I would say to that parent, I believe you love your child. I believe that above all other things. I trust that you are doing the very best that you can do. I'm not meaning in any way, shape, or form to be critical, but I share with you that I'm concerned about this specific behavior or activity or performance because it's not up to par. And if your child doesn't come up to standard, the risk is that he won't be able to move successfully into the next environment. And that next environment, I'm going to identify it for the family. It might be moving into grade 3. It might be moving into secondary. It might be moving into, I'm going to try to connect the dots for that family member so that they understand why I'm trying to boost the performance level. But I think parents and extended family members have the same concern that you're having unrealistic expectations of them if you are critical in any way of the child. And what I try to share with them is, I'm not being critical of you. I'm not being critical of your child. I'm trying to help you understand this is a performance standard. And if you're not aware of that, you can't possibly achieve it. So my responsibility is to make you aware. Everybody else, that's a favorite one I get. Everybody else is telling me he's doing just fine. I hear it all the time. I can't tell you how many parents have said to me, well, you're the only one who's telling me that he's not doing enough of this or enough of that, or he's not doing it fast enough. You're the only one who says he shouldn't have an aide with him all the time. You're the only one. And I always say to them, I understand what you're sharing with me. You're feeling a bit frustrated with me because I keep pushing the envelope. I keep challenging you in ways that other people aren't challenging you. Sandwich. It's because I care. And I've been listening to what you've been saying to me, and you've been saying to me, you believe that your child can get a job in the future. You believe that your child will live independently. And if you believe that, and I believe that, we have to pay attention to that next environment. What is it going to take to move into that next environment? My responsibility is to help you understand what you're up against, what your child is up against, and what I'm up against as a service provider in terms of meeting the goals for your child. And if he's not meeting them, if he's not meeting the competencies, if he's not gaining the competencies, then I'm not doing you any service by pretending that he is. And I think it's hard for service providers. Sometimes it's much easier to just walk away from it and say, well, they don't care, so why should I care? I don't want that for you. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for your child. I don't want your child to graduate from secondary and suddenly discover that he or she has not achieved the competencies that they're going to need in order to move successfully into that next environment. And I have to start when he's little. I can't wait until he's big. If I wait until your child is on the verge of graduation, again, I've failed you as a service provider. Service providers play a part. If you're working early childhood, if you're working with toddlers and infants, you need to help the parents understand what that next environment requires. Not just what you want for the child and what they want for the child, but what competencies that baby or that toddler has to gain in order to be successful in preschool. If it's a preschooler, what competencies they have to acquire in order to be successful in kindy. If you don't achieve those competencies, the child is going to fall further and further behind. And that's what we see happening frequently in the field of blindness and low vision, is that children are doing fairly well initially, and then as they get older, they're staying at the same level, and those sighted kids are shooting up, gaining more and more and more competencies because they've been challenged from the beginning to achieve those competencies. That's what I want for your children, the same level of challenge so that they can continue to come up the ladder, so to speak, of childhood and reach adulthood successfully.
So what I hear you saying, Karen, is as service providers, we can't also be the people who are sugarcoating it and saying everything's going to be all right, when we know from our experiences that there really are some important things that you need to be working on at different times. You really do need to give that feedback. You do need to be assertive yourself and have confidence in yourself.
Yeah, I think ultimately service providers know what's needed because they've been trained up. They pay attention to what's going on in the environment. They pay attention to outcomes, and they need to share that with families and with kids so that those other people in the life of a child who has blindness or low vision understands that the outcome goal is to be successful in life. I think that's the critical piece. And I do think that it is a cop-out if you don't give kids and families realistic feedback, because you're just aggravating the problem or adding to the problem rather than helping to resolve the problem.
One of the things that I'm constantly finding, I work with a lot of teenagers, sort of in the 14, 15, 16, they're getting ready to transition into that next environment, and I'm teaching at home a lot of chores or home-based routines that they need to learn to do, and the component that always comes in is the amount of time they're taking to do a task. Even if they've acquired the skill to do it, it's the speed of the task. And I'm always thinking, well, hang on, if your next environment is uni or work, you're not going to be able to take this long to do something. So one of the strategies I've actually started doing with some particularly slow teenagers who don't get that feedback is we get a stopwatch out and we actually time, okay, let's do this task, that's your time. All right, let's do it again. Can you do it faster? And I think as a service provider, that's something that was within my scope to provide that feedback. And the parents go, oh, they're so slow. They take so long to do it. It's just quicker for me to do it. It's like, okay, well, let's just time this and see how long it takes. And otherwise, they're never going to get faster.
And they do kind of sometimes think it'll never get faster. This is just how long it takes when you have vision loss, right? That you can't get more efficient at it.
Yeah.
And yet we know that's not true. We know that it's about practice and it's about perfecting a technique that enables you to do things more quickly without sight. And I think that using a stopwatch is a great strategy. I would encourage it. I would encourage parents to use stopwatch, timers, egg timers, these kinds of tools, and to set a schedule. So if a parent is saying to me, it just takes too long, I don't have time for this, I'm always going to say, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what is realistic. Is it realistic that maybe you help out during the week when the child has to get to school, but on the weekends you don't? You pull back? Would you be willing to trade off and let the child have full responsibility on the weekend and time the child and see how long it's taking and see if you can get any incremental change over time? I might chart the progress that the child is making, quite literally on paper, using something like WikiSticks to chart the time, the first time I time you, how long that's taking you on a little graph, and then how long it took you the next time. And if it's going down or if it's going up, I'm going to mark that and have you look at that and think about what we're trying to achieve. If I know that there's another child in the family, I might time that other child. I might time myself. I might time that parent. I might say, let's see how long it takes your mom to do this, or Let's see how long it takes me to do this. And that's not what I expect of you right away, but how about if we set that as a goal? You're perfectly capable of doing this. You've demonstrated for me that you can do it. You're good with this activity. Let's see if we can build speed. That's what I think service providers do best, is to have this more realistic perspective on what it is that we can expect of blind and visually impaired children. As a service provider, I want you to be thinking outside the box. How can I make this happen? If it's about getting out a stopwatch, then that's what you need to do. So I might use the child's phone. I might ask the child to set the timer. You set the timer for yourself, then check it and see how fast you did it. Every time you're doing this activity, I'd like you to time it with your phone. And then at the end of the week, let me know. Because I think as service providers, the hard part for me as a service provider is I'm not there every day. I can't be there every day. And I think sometimes we do the things we need to do in terms of giving the kid the feedback, charting it out, timing it, whatever the case may be. And then we leave, and it doesn't happen again until we come back again. So I want you to be thinking as service providers, not just about what you're going to do as a service provider in the here and now, this day, this activity, this client, but how you can replicate yourself in a sense, virtually, moving forward into the future. What can you set into motion for the child to continue to get feedback in a loop that's going to work ongoing?
Vision Australia.
Blindness,
Low vision.
Opportunity.